Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Let This Mind Podcast. We are here every Monday at 8 p.m. talking about the mental health issues. I just combined the word all together, the mental health issues that we need to talk about. And we decided to launch in the month of mental health awareness. We're talking about the things that some people don't want to talk about. I have the pleasure and the honor of being joined by my amazing co-hosts, Jermaine and Chris. Say hey to the people.
Hey world.
Happy Monday.
Awesome. Happy Monday, and it is a happy Monday. I had the day off because of allergies. But anywho, um, so tonight's episode, we're going to be talking about broken people and broken relationships. We're just following the natural progression of all the conversations we've been talking about. We've been talking about the wounded healer, and we've been talking about broken homes, and we've been talking about boundaries. And then I know last week we were mentioning, just a nice segue, how a lack of boundaries could create a broken person or a broken relationship. So we're going to jump right into it. We're going to talk about some things that we know clinically, and then our own personal stories of brokenness and what that looks like and how we've had to overcome that. And we'd never present a problem without a solution. So we're going to try to offer some ways to heal from being broken and some ways to repair or mend some broken relationships. It can be hard work, and if you don't put in the work, then it won't work. So, all right, awesome. So, you know how we like to do it here. Let me pull up my little notes. We like to define some of the words that we're using, and so I know when I was looking up what does it mean to be broken, the definition just said it plainly. It means damaged, no longer able to work, interrupted, or not continuous. That describes both a broken relationship and a broken person. When we're talking about a broken person, it's talking about when someone is suffering emotional pain that is so strong that it changes the way they live, usually as a result of an unpleasant event. And when we're talking about a broken relationship, it's when a connection, like a marriage, family bond, or friendship, is damaged due to unfortunate circumstances, neglect, abuse, or trauma. It can result in no contact, like you don't have any contact with someone in a relationship, or just pretty adverse interactions. So, what are we thinking about with broken people and broken relationships? It's like the chicken and the egg. Which comes first? Does the broken person come first, or the broken relationship causes the broken person? What do y'all think?
I never know how to answer the chicken or the egg because
Oh,
in order for the egg to exist, the chicken has to exist
right.
because it needs a casing. I say they go hand in hand. I think
Mm,
we forget that relationships aren't just romantic, they are platonic, they are familial, which means our first teachers, our families,
mm,
which could literally set the stage for all the other relationships we find ourselves in. And
yeah.
if not catered to correctly and if not cultivated correctly, we then get broken people. And because we have broken people who don't heal and don't have the tools and the skill sets, it then leads to further continuing the cycle in how broken individuals enter into broken relationships.
Yeah, it's just like one bad cycle around and around. What do
Mm-hmm.
you think, Chris?
Um, I mean, for me, what I always go back to or think about is that family tree.
Mm,
Um, we like to say the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, but
right.
some people's
Mm,
trees are dried up. Some people's trees have no, limbs on them. So I think always looking at it in that aspect in terms of where you come from and examining the how not only how we are connected, but like what um, how those relationships play a role in just our day to day. And if you have the privilege of even having two parents, right? Some people might not have a parent who's even alive to say that they had that relationship. So not only just talking about the ones who are present physically but absent emotionally or mentally, but the ones who are actually here and how we repair that relationship within ourselves. Because I know it's played a role in my life and the people around me, but yeah, just kind of examining that. relationship too.
Yeah, I mean, and the brokenness comes from so many different places that it's hard to pinpoint sometimes. It's like you have to go all the way down to the root of the foundation, which could mean that we have to go back a couple generations, right? Like if you see
Mhm.
a mother daughter having an issue, it usually didn't just start there. Usually it went back like way, a couple generations back. And so I realize and recognize that most people don't want to do that work. So I guess the question is, what are some of the ways that a person becomes broken? What happens? What's the process? Because if we're saying that that leads into a broken relationship, or the broken relationship is broken and then swings right back, like a pendulum swinging back and forth into the broken person, what causes the brokenness, and what happens with that?
I mean, that's such a deep question, right? I think brokenness is just it can be a mixture of a lot of things.
Mhm.
I think not having expectations that are met. I think not having emotions or um, feelings that are validated.
Yep.
Um, I think belittlement, that's a word.
It
When
is.
people are belittled, when people are torn down, when people are overlooked, when
Mm,
people are misunderstood.
yeah.
I think all of that is brokenness, right? It's feeling like, because I feel like we all start maybe in this world as a whole, and then certain life experiences kind of like poke at it, and then there's cracks. And if we
Mhm.
don't know how to mend those cracks, and if we're not surrounding ourselves with people who can hold and help us maintain, right, those cracks just get bigger and they kind of leak into a whole lot of different situations in life. So I think it's just a combination of a lot of things, and if you're not mindful or aware of what's causing these breaks, it just continues. And then we find ourselves later on in life like, how did I get here? And it's like, well, those unchecked things from the past, they're still very much a thing. And they probably have evolved into way worse situations and emotions and resentment and bitterness and all of those other things. So it could be a lot, a lot.
Yeah, and then it's like just you saying that, Jamae, is me thinking of, and I was like, oh, I need to write this down because I was gonna forget, like the brokenness of a bone, or like you have a fracture, and so you have this small, tiny fracture that if it's not treated, and you keep stepping on it, you keep jumping on it, or hopping on it, or doing whatever on it, that thing is gonna like just spread, and then right, it turns into the bitterness, the resentment, the unforgiveness,
Yeah.
if it's not set properly, if we don't take the time for it to really heal, if we don't put the right casing around it,
Yeah.
if we don't protect that thing, that bone is done.
Yeah.
And then you break a finger. Thank God I never have. Apologies to anyone who has.
Yeah.
You don't set it right, it'll grow weird. It'll be odd and strange. So it's just like that.
Hmm.
Chris, what do you think about brokenness, or where it stems from, that origin?
Yeah, so while the both of you were talking, I was kind of rolling through my mind, kind of what I've, not only the work that I've kind of done, but some of the literature that I've read around the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and one of the books that I read, I believe it was either 2020 or 2021. The book is called "It Didn't Start with You,"
Ooh.
and it's basically, the title is like how inherited family trauma shapes who we are and how to end the cycle.
Mm.
And I think the most interesting part from that book that sat with me was going back to that family tree again. There were people way back in the family tree
Yeah.
that had behaviors that the person is currently dealing with now.
Mm.
That A, they've either never met, or B, the family purposely chose not to speak about
Yeah.
the relationship that they had with that family member. And now that I'm looking at it now, I remember that book was intense, because for me it was really a matter of thinking about, for us as Black people, who are the family members that we have never met or don't
Mm.
fully know or understand. And they may say, "Oh, you look like such and such way back then," but just
Mm-hmm.
you may also, not only may you look like such and such, but you also may be acting like them, have behaviors like them. And I think
That's
really
good.
that challenge of nature versus nurture, chicken versus egg, comes into play,
Yeah.
where people You know, your own family history may not be well documented. You know, unless you have living in an intergenerational family with grandparents or great grandparents, and you know, unfortunately, not a lot of us have that privilege that we do. So we lose a lot of, I would say, not only ourselves but ourselves through our ancestry in that. So
Yeah.
you know, I think for this one, and I was thinking about the topic, and I didn't want to think about it in a negative way, but because you know the idea of being broken, a broken person. Um, you know, we always like to say, if you're not learning or growing, then you're dead,
Yeah.
unfortunately. Um, and I think in this space and conversation, and especially with the roles that we all play, you know, I think it's important to address, like, you know, if you are actively struggling with depression, anxiety, suicidal ideation, like, you know, I think the number is 988 that you can reach out to and talk to someone, right, who's not a stranger. If you don't have access to you know, a therapist, just being mindful of, you can reach out to someone who's not gonna be not judgmental and talk you through whatever you're going through. But it really, for me, comes down to like that family trauma aspect and the things we don't talk about. Because I think those are what's most hurtful. Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but
No.
those are what's most hurtful to us as the individuals. Because again, if we don't address it or bring light to it, then we're all repeating the same cycles, and it's a never ending wall of brokenness. So
Yep. Yep. No, I was just going to agree completely. I do want to take a moment to acknowledge our comments, taking a page out of Jermaine's book from last week. Hey, Sister Joyce, how you doing?
Hey,
Blessings to
Auntie
you.
Joyce.
Hey, Prophetess Sherry, love you so much. And look who's on. Daddy's on.
My
Hey, how you
dad's in
doing?
the building.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you so much for your support. Everyone who's tuned in, who's commented, who's watched, who's shared. We appreciate you so much. It's important that we get the word out of these very important topics. You know, Chris, when you were talking, I was kind of getting sad, almost like a tear was forming, and I might cry, and it's okay, because I'm
mhm.
thinking of how much history and genealogy we have missed out by slavery, right?
Yeah,
We were stolen. That history was stolen, and with it the knowledge of what we've gone through or going through or will go through, that
Yeah.
we don't know, you know, in the motherland what someone was going through, what they were experiencing, and we don't know what happened to them, and all of our history was erased, and the ones we have, I mean, that goes back a few generations, but we've missed out on so much. There are so many things happening and occurring that we're like, I really can't pinpoint where this is coming from. So now we have to guess. Now we have to try to piece things together. They didn't keep our
yeah,
records really good. You mentioned that, right? Bad record keeping. We were property, so it's like, okay, what, we don't know who's who. People were Jane Doe or this that. We have
yeah.
the name. Hmm.
I'll be honest. I can share a little bit about,
Please.
for me, like when I was, you know, and I've mentioned this in the previous episodes as well. But like as a child, right, you always being observant and knowing
Yep.
something's not right here. Something, you know, I don't feel like I
Hmm.
belong or fit in or whatever the case is. And from throughout the duration of my time in high school, you know, I went to Brockton High, so I went to a giant school, and because of that, I kind of reflected more inward, and I would say than any other period of my life.
Mm.
And I'll be honest right now, I can look back and definitely say like you know, like a lot of teenagers at the time, had like an identity crisis back then because I did not know, you know, I know I'm good at school, but I know I have friends who aren't,
Right.
but I want to fit in with them, but I
Mm.
can also be in these social groups. So
Yep.
for me, when I turned 18, I did an ancestry test, and
Hmm.
this is well before we found out that they were holding on to our data and all that stuff. So they got my DNA somewhere in the world.
They got
Um,
it.
they got it,
Make
but
it a
for me, it was
clone.
really about figuring out. Yeah, it'll be a good one.
I
But
agree.
it's really about figuring out where I come from, right? You know, I know my family's from Trinidad. I know my father's family's from the South in America, but like that's not where it only comes from. And I
Mm.
don't want to be that person, but I always try to look back in that. And for me now, I've kind of said, you know, stuff based off of what you said, like this, you know, this environment that we're growing up in, and this world that we grew up in, and this will jump into next week's topic too. We've we don't belong in this physical location of America,
No.
right? However, and we'll talk about this more next week. We excel in all areas despite the setbacks and difficulties that
Yeah.
we face in as families and people who have trauma. But I do think we are living in the best time where we're able to have these conversations. There's a space now for mental health conversations to happen. I think it's unless you're really shut off from the world and ignorance is bliss, and if you choose to live that way, um, I can't think of a space, whether it be sports, entertainment, media, that people aren't talking about mental health. And I think what this means now is having those conversations, hopefully at the dinner table, at Thanksgiving, at
Mm-hmm.
Christmas, right? Juneteenth is coming up. Why are we celebrating that? We celebrated Mother's Day uh, last week, and I know for me and my family dichotomy and dynamic, like my mother, my mother lost her mother when she was a child,
Mm.
so she didn't get, she had mother figures in her life, but I know she didn't get the nurturing skills that she probably would have had
Right.
she had her at
Actual
when she
mom.
needed when she
Mm-hmm.
needed her, right? So then in turn, my mother had me when she was 15. My father was significantly older. Um, I like to think had she had her mother, her biological mother, she would have I wouldn't say been a different person, but been more in tune with who she was then. She is now. She is now. And like I've talked about, she's the reason why I go to therapy and um, you know why I continue on day to day, and she gives me the encouragement I need. But just thinking about if she had that support then, who she would be now. Um, and again, obviously, I'm doing the work, being in this space to make sure that uh, my daughter and those who come after me are able to say, well, all right, my dad did this, so I am able to do this, and yeah, it takes time. It takes time, and if we hopefully if I live to 75, in 75 years, it'll be time well spent. But we're talking about 100, 200 years of family histories that you may not know, or you may not even, uh, you may not have any idea why you act the way you act, or what have you, or whatever the case is. So, yeah, just a little background on how I see the conversation.
Yeah. I mean, that's much needed background. And I did a DNA test too. Well, my dad actually did it, and then when he found out that they were taking our information, for nefarious purposes, he was like, "Oh, you don't have to do it." But then, we started seeing our genealogy and things like that. Honestly, I think that should be free, but that's a whole digression from this conversation. I think our DNA testing should be free because we didn't come over here on vacation. But anywho, back to the topic. Um, you know, there are some key things that you can identify. Chris, you were sharing. Um, you can identify some brokenness. Identity crisis can be definitely, identified and put in that category. Jamae, from that clinical perspective, what do you see that would categorize someone as broken, right? And then we know the broken individual. I'm gonna keep saying this because we got to see the path. It funnels
Hmm.
right into that broken relationship, and then the broken relationship pushes right back on the broken individual. What are some things you've seen, over the years, or just in your work and clinical things like that?
Um, I think a clear indicator is kind of how people perceive themselves and how they perceive the world.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, this mistrust that a lot of people have when it comes to the outside world, it was shaped from somewhere, right? We just don't
Yeah.
wake up and say, I don't trust people and I can't with people. Like something is in there and they feel like because I was dropped over here or because I was misused and abused over here, I now view the world as, and it's a distortion, really. It's like
Ugh,
not all people are evil, not
yeah.
all people are manipulative and malicious in their intent. But because of the pain that we've been conditioned to, we look at everything and other people in the world as everyone's out to get me. Those who are like highly offended and get really defensive, those are like skill tactics that they have
Yeah.
developed because they've been broken and because they've been hurt. Like, I have a lot of conversations, and you can tell when um they overgeneralize, like all men are cheaters and
Yep.
all black men are
Mhm.
abusive and all black women are ghetto. And it's like,
Mhm.
first of all, hold on. Like, not
Pause.
don't overgeneralize anybody, but when you are accustomed to seeing all black men doing a certain thing, you then generalize and say all black
Yeah.
men are this.
Yeah.
Or I can't enter into a relationship because relationships turn into this. And you can hear the patterns, and patterns of repetition come from places of pain. And so
Mm.
when you and it takes a person who can pick up on the patterns to hear it. Like, it takes a mindful person to understand, like, oh, the reason why I hate anybody wearing red is because when I was 3, my abuser wore red all the time. So now the color red pisses me off and it triggers
Yeah.
something in me. And it's like, well, it was a pattern, right? It's something that your brain, like the book, The Body Keeps the Score, like your body remembers. Your brain may not always remember, you may not always be consciously aware of what you remember, but the body remembers, right? So people who make those overgeneralized statements, people who look at the world as evil, other people as evil, and then it's hard for them to see themselves as something other than the pain that they've experienced.
Right.
That's a clear indicator. Like, some people, like Chris was saying about identity crisis, some people are so scared to let go of the pain because they're like, this is who I am. This is all I know. My identity has been based off of the pain that I have suffered. So to let that go is to let me go. To lose that means I've lost a major part of myself, and for
Mm.
them that is scary. So they hold on to that, and that's where we get those victim mindsets. That's where we get those understandings, like, I'm always going to be broken because I've always been misused. And since I've
Yeah.
always been misused, I can't trust myself with other people. It's like this downward spiral of pain. And because we don't catch it, because we're not paying attention and we're not making the linkages that we need to make, it's hard. So,
Yeah.
brokenness, it shows itself, but something that is an indicator is the repetitious ways of thinking, ways of behaving, ways of observing, and how we interact with others.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that list is amazing, and I think it gives people a clear like understanding. And you know what? If you're listening and you identify some of those things within yourself, it's okay because awareness is the first step. And so if
Mhm.
you're realizing that as Jermaine was speaking, that you're checking off a box and you're saying, "Yep, this is me. This is me. This is me." It's okay to recognize that you could be in a broken place, but brokenness isn't your identity. You just happen to be in that space right now.
Yeah.
And that's a place you can shift from, right? That you don't have
Mhm.
to be stuck in a pool of brokenness or in a box of cement brokenness and you can't move and can't get out. No,
Yeah.
that's not the way it is.
Yeah.
But life happens and circumstances happen, and then brokenness happens. If people are
Mhm.
mishandled or dropped, what happens to a fine china bowl and you drop it? It's broken. You drop something, it breaks. You hit something
Mhm.
too hard, it breaks. You shatter
Mhm.
something, it's broken. It doesn't mean that you are forever broken or will always be broken. It means that right now you're in a broken spot. When you're aware of that, i think I think just me thinking of this, I'm like, man, people can't even be healed unless we admit that we're broken and that we're
Yeah.
in a broken spot. And so that's in the church, that's out of the church, that's in your job, that's everywhere in your family. Oh no, I'm fine, I'm okay. What do we say? A blessed and highly favored. No, you can say that, right? You can believe that. But if you're not right now, if you're
Yeah.
destroyed, if you
Yeah.
just feel like, oh my gosh, I'm breaking inside, but you're telling everyone that you're okay, first of all, that's deception, right? Now you're putting on a mask and a facade. And when all that stuff comes crashing down, you're going to be even more broken than when you first started. So let's be honest.
Let's.
Brokenness is healed by honesty. We have to be transparent. We have to be honest. We
Yeah.
talked about finding a good tribe. That's key. Chris, adding to what Jermaine said, do you have any other identifiers for the brokenness of people? We want to make this very clear so no one's like, oh, what does someone look like? Or is it me? What have you seen that has contributed to people being broken? Like, this is it.
I think I mean, yeah, two of the biggest things you may say are the patterns, right, and then
Yeah.
your reflection on reality.
Yeah.
If your go-to is, people like to use the words like pessimistic, optimistic, glass half full, half empty, whatever the case is. And I've mentioned this before, and I'll mention it again. It's one of those things where if you, and I'll explain it, but if you are unhappy with where you are in life, or unhappy with the results you're getting in life, but you don't make any changes, or things stay the same, and you're continuously saying, "Why me? Woe me? The world is out to get me," right? We know, the planet is not out to get us, right? But society may be the people who we choose to call friends or families or acquaintances or whatever the case is. You're not benefiting from those relationships. I feel as though if you don't feel fulfilled in your life, really, in your soul, or however you interpret consciousness, at some point, either you currently are broken, or there's some trauma or some pain that needs to be healed. And one of the things that, Steph, I know you mentioned your tribe. I know it can be, it can be a very lonely journey to go from being broken, right? And or if you are a person who just doesn't have anyone who you can really rely on, or you're mistrusting of, then you really need to kind of consider, all right, how am I contributing to the relationships around me?
Yeah.
If I'm quitting every job or leaving every relationship, or always blaming and pointing the finger at other people, they say one finger pointing up, three pointing back. So I think really just taking time to take stock, right? And just like how we do every New Year's, right? We want to go out, we want to drink, we want to have a good time, right? Some of us like to do our vision boards. Some of us like to set goals for the year, right? How often do those goals get accomplished, right?
Yeah.
Or is it unrealistic things that we're looking to accomplish that, maybe if we start smaller behaviors, then we'd be able to. But I think the biggest one is just, those patterns, right? We all, in social work, we're taught to look at behavior.
Yeah.
We're taught to look at what we do, not only what you do on a daily basis, but, every couple of years, what are you doing with your life? And then obviously, there's a further conversation around people who, those complicated mental health issues. If you have substance abuse disorder, which all throw wrenches into those to those things and those healings, and you may have to start over, every month, every week, every day. For a lot of people, every day it's a journey just to get out of bed and continue to live on it daily.
It is.
So I think my biggest thing that I've been trying to encourage myself and the people around me is taking credit for your work that you do in life, right? Not only our job, right? We get our check and then we spend it on our bills, but taking credit on the season that you're in your life now versus the one that was the worst last year or a couple years ago, or whatever the case is, because we don't often get that credit for continuing, right? And I like to encourage people to always reach out to those who will encourage them, and not be shy about giving praise, because that's the biggest thing that I know for myself, right? Our love languages and all those things. Words of affirmation are the most important thing for me. I don't know about everyone else, but definitely making sure that you're doing that for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Sharon sending love.
Auntie.
Come on, aunties. Aunties are showing up.
Yeah.
Okay. Come on. Aunties shows up. Come on, aunties.
The women will always show up. That's
This is true, but Dad showed up too. Don't you worry. He was on it. Gathering the folks. We gathering the folks. And then this is Sister Bianca. We go to church together. So She did ask, she just got in a relationship and needs help and guidance. Just waiting for her to kind of respond back to what Jamae asked. What guidance do you need? What's going on? What's happening? And I think it's a good time to kind of segue into the broken relationships, right? Where we're talking about people who could have a lack of communication. You don't pay attention to who you're with. You could feel jealousy or resentment. For
The
the
honeymoon
relationship, but
phase.
the honeymoon phase. And you know what? And we talk about that, and a lot of people, what Jermaine said, I love that. We kind of ascribe that just to something romantic. Because when you meet someone for the first time, like a friend, you do have a honeymoon phase. It's like all about them, and you're like, yeah, 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 yeah. Then when the going gets rough, it's like, ooh, you know what I mean? When you start working with someone, a coworker, you all were coworkers, you know what I mean? So you meet someone, it's like, oh, it's all good. Then you start going over some bumps, and it's like, oh, what's going on? So you start kind of wondering, is it even worth it to keep myself in this relationship? What's happening? You want to distance yourself. The I think the first thing we want to do is kind of pull away or pull back whenever we're kind of facing some adversity in a relationship of any kind. But it's honestly best to press in and know the other person and know yourself. If you blow up or explode, maybe you do need to step back for a little bit and get some clarity. But I was just waiting for Sister Bianca to respond, but I see she hasn't yet. That's okay. I'll probably end up just tagging her in the post because I think this would be a good space too. If people have relationship questions, if you have questions about a broken relationship or a comment or something you want to say, you can throw that in the chat. This is the time, in addition to we're doing the podcast, we believe in God that He's bringing families back together and repairing homes and mothers and daughters and fathers and sons and vice versa, and everybody's coming back together. So this is a good space to be in. I want to hear some personal things about broken relationships from you both. Okay. And then I'll share too. How have you navigated a broken relationship or relationships? Because there could be multiple. How do you navigated that, and what did that look like? What did that process look like? Just in your life and your journey.
Well,
Go ahead.
Look, we in deep waters
Go
tonight,
ahead.
okay? We in deep waters tonight. Clutch your
uh,
pearls.
well, so I'm currently talking to my therapist about this myself.
Mm,
I've realized the brokenness that came from my relationships I have with men. I
mm,
feel like my whole life has been trying to figure out what place I hold in a man's life
mm,
because, of where my brothers were, my father, my uncles, my cousins, you know what I mean? I always kind of felt like my purpose in their life was only contingent upon what their needs of me were and never just who I was as a
ooh,
person, right? But then I'm trying to empower myself and say, no, who you are as a person, that's valuable. And you're more than just what you do. But history was showing that I wasn't needed unless they needed something. You know
wow.
what I mean? And then being a big girl with some curves and things, then there's that whole thing. And it's like, hey, you might just be a walking, talking pleasure thing for some people, and then it's like it's really hard to develop the confidence of I am somebody's girlfriend and hopefully one day I am going to be someone's wife, when historically all I've seen is I'm useful for what I can provide, whether that
Wow.
is physical, whether that is emotional, but outside of that, who I am as a person didn't seem valuable to men. And so I've had to learn how to heal that part because I can't hold my new people accountable for what the old people have done.
Right.
And so I had to take a step back and be like, Jermaine, you have to heal that because I can't throw unrealistic expectations on the next guy or the
Mm,
next person, even if it's a friend. I can't say, like, hey, so a man broke this, so you're going to have to fix this because you are a man.
right.
That's not the reality. Like, if a man broke it, and I'm still living with it, I'm going to have to figure out how I can heal that. I can't put that on
Absolutely.
other people. And
That's a
because
good
I
one.
used to do that, I used to push people away. I'm like, hey, listen, where you going? You're supposed to help a sister out. And it's like, well, no, that's on me. I have to figure that out for myself. And so it required an awareness within myself to say, like, what are the patterns that I hold?
Yeah.
How do I view men? How do I view myself with men? And something that I realized is I never felt safe around men. Because I didn't
Mm.
feel valued, I didn't feel appreciated. And so uh ironically, I have more male friends than I do female friends,
Mhm.
but it's not like I always 100% felt safe around men because I'm just like, y'all are going to leave anyway. Y'all probably only here because you want something anyway. So, do I trust you with everything? No. Will I give you some stuff? It's like breadcrumbing. I'm going to give you a little something, keep y'all coming back, but I know y'all aren't going to stay here forever. So, there was a lot of stuff, and I'm still actively working on it, like to this day, to this very second. But I had to realize where it came from because if you cut a tree down, don't just think it stops at the stubs because the roots still exist. So
Come
the whole
on.
tree that was there is going to keep growing no matter how many times you cut it. So I had to
Mm.
like, let's go to the root. Let's figure
Yeah,
out where this thing stemmed from, what has been feeding this tree, what has been fueling it, what
my.
was watering it, like all of those things. I was like, let me uproot this thing so I can be healed so that when my husband does come, I'm not looking at him like, sir, you're going to have to take on all of this work. It's like, well, I've been working on it. Thank you for being here. And let's go be the next Michelle and Barack. Let's do that.
Come
But just
on.
know, but like just know I'm not coming at you from a broken place because I
Yeah.
am actively healing and I know that's a process, but that's where I'm at. So
Man, that's so good. I think to hear that entire process from the place of brokenness and then transitioning into where you are in your place of healing, and just what you shared when I was looking up, okay, about broken relationships, it's a syndrome called broken woman syndrome. Have you both heard of that before?
no, I
Okay,
like
so
it.
it's, yeah, and I know you can
Yeah.
identify with it because it's a syndrome where women have adverse relationships with every male in their lives, and it's because they've been mishandled or misplaced, or they weren't properly affirmed, or they weren't spoken into by the males in their lives, and that foundational male, like father, brother, you know what I mean, when you start in those formation years. But it's called broken woman syndrome, and I'm like, oh, I need to bring this up. So it's not a coincidence that you would mention this and it flow right into that, and that's a real thing, and people are identifying that. When you hear someone with daddy issues, sometimes they end up with a guy who's very older than them, right? Because you want to try to replace, or you want to try to fill in that void or that gap. All
Hmm.
that kind of falls into that.
Yeah.
Chris, I want to hear about your personal story too, but I did see that Bianca responded, and it's a good response. So I'm gonna pull it up, and then we're gonna jump back into the personal stories of transitioning from brokenness to healing. So, woo, this is okay. This is a good one. So Bianca says she has her guard up, and literally anyone else in the comments, you watching, you want to ask some questions, you have three professionals here ready and willing to give advice and just share with you. So Bianca says, I have my guard up. I met him on May 13th and he's understanding. We went on our first date. Okay. We have chatted on the phone. He made me pizza. Come on, chef. That's it. A man who could cook. Thank God. He made pizza. He's very caring, but her birthday was on the 19th. Happy belated birthday. And I
Mhm.
haven't heard from him or replied. Oh, he hasn't replied to my text. And I understand that he works a night job, but I have questions. I'm going to throw that to you, Chris. Um, because,
Whoa.
because, because response times between what I've seen is response times between men and women vary and are different. We want something different. Men kind of doing their own thing, and it's okay. So I'm gonna throw that to you and ask that you would just kind of broach that topic.
Come
Or
on, Christoph.
Well, anybody who knows me knows I have two phones, one for work and one for my personal life, and I don't answer either of them.
this is why I knew. So I want to hear
So
why, because I'm getting upset even thinking about
You
that.
ain't lying. That man
yeah,
don't never
y'all.
answer his
Sorry.
Okay, so
Not sorry, but what I would say to Ms. Thomas about this, it's new. The 13th and the 19th, what day are we at? The 21st. So your birthday was 2 days ago.
yeah,
Again, happy belated birthday. But again, I would say, and I'm not a dating expert by no means, but it's a new relationship, and I think if you guys, and I'm glad you have questions, because the first question I would ask was, or try to establish is, what are the expectations? If I
That's
met
good.
someone last week, unless in conversation it's come up that I know it's your birthday, and you know, I've said that, I reach out or set that expectation of communication, then it's one thing to violate that or break that, but it's another if it hasn't been established. And I think, being so new,
It's good.
you haven't learned we can talk through text message, through phone calls, but if you don't really know exactly what people are doing for their 24 hours that they get, and it sounds like, working nights, and I know that very well. You could be tired, and I'm not making excuses for anyone, but I was just saying, if I was in either person's shoes, I would communicate. I'm busy, during the day. Like I said, I have a daughter that I spend time with when I'm not at work. Work sometimes can be busy. I prefer texting, or I prefer phone calls, those type of things, in order to kind of get a better understanding. But like I said, I mean, if it's someone you're interested in, take that time and express those things. But
Yeah.
it's so new. That's very new. It's very new, and I think we are quick to discard people because they're not meeting the uncommunicated expectations that we put on them. So I would definitely take the time to, next time you connect, acknowledge it, set an expectation if you'd like, and then again, however he responds or your response, if it's not up to par, if it's not up to your standards, right? Because the standard you set for yourself, then that's about, like we talked about, a boundary that you have to know you'll be okay with, or not. So that's kind of the response I'll give to that. But
That's
if you know me, I'll answer my phone. But
All right, praying for your future wife that she send her the smoke signal. Okay, try to get a hold of you. But I think that's great advice, and you know, sometimes, and speaking from a woman's perspective, we can build up all these different scenarios in a head. And I'm not saying that men can't. I'm just saying that I know women to be a little more creative in that space where if we don't hear from someone, we'll think he's with four other women, or he's got married, or he's with his wife, he's with his children. So we start building up all these scenarios. So I love what you said, because it does kind of help to ease the mind where he might have other things to do, and it is such a new relationship. And if there has not been an expectation of communication set up, and Sister Bianca, please share, if there has or hasn't been, if there's no communication, like, hey, we're going to text every day, or we're going to do this, do that, if that hasn't been set up. And I think sometimes a lot of people think, oh, maybe that doesn't need to be established, but it does, because it cuts down on the anxiety that we feel. If we're in a relationship and we know, hey, we're gonna text this if I don't hear from you, and this, that, and we're gonna communicate all throughout the day, or at least not let 4 or 5 hours go by without someone sending a message back, and so forth and so on. That helps to reduce some of that, like, where is he? What's going on? These questions, like, okay, I know you worked a night job, is he with someone else? You know what I mean? So, and then I see the second part. You said you're also not used to having a male attracted to you, right? So you wanna ask the questions. You want to make sure, is this the norm? Is this usually what happens? Is this usually what occurs? Jermaine, what do you have to say to this? I have 1,000 things running in my head, but what do you have to say? I'll put the comment back up. What do you have to say to
I mean,
Bianca?
I echo what everyone else has already said. I think it's because it's so new, you don't want to hold him accountable to expectations that may or may not have been communicated. I think it is a perfect time to like let people know, like, hey, it was my birthday and you kind of missed it. Kind of bothered me, but I'm moving on. Not moving on, like leave the man. I'm just saying, like,
Okay.
it hurt. like there's just some things like at the beginning stages that it's like you don't know what you want. They don't know what you want. So,
Right.
it's only been a week. And I think because the second comment where she was saying how this is new to her and she's not used to someone liking you. It's like, here's what I've learned. And all the male friends that I have, men, when they are serious about something, they make their desires known. I don't know how truthful that is because men think they're not complicated. They really aren't, if you ask me, and that's just me. But I think it's really about it's allowing things
What?
to naturally happen. I don't think anything naturally happens in a week. I think it takes time. It takes time to cultivate that real, let's talk every day and wish me a happy birthday. The fact that you
Yeah.
got pizza, sis, bravo. Bravo
Look.
to you. Bravo to you. So that means he cares because men feed people that they love. Yeah. Yeah. So
Hmm.
I say give it time. Don't be so quick to write them off and, communicate expectations and stuff.
Yeah. Because it sounds like you want him to respond. I mean, I don't know anyone who doesn't want someone to respond. You want him to respond. It's new. He's working nights. Not really sure what's going on. But here's the reality too, that if you're not getting a response and you keep reaching out and keep texting, maybe calling and things like that, it's okay, to just kind of take a step back and evaluate if this is someone that you want to communicate with. If he should respond, right? And you're able to have that conversation with him and say, hey, let's set this expectation of how we're going to contact and how we're going to keep in, communication and things like that. If he doesn't agree to it, if he doesn't want to do that, then it's okay to explore new things, right? Where
Mhm.
you're able to say, I tried this out. At least I'm dipping my foot in the pool, right? There are some people who don't have any dates, no man to cook a pizza for them. They're making a DiGiorno in their oven right now. I mean, I'm just saying what I'm saying, right? No
Please
one to
send me
take
that.
them out, no one to do anything. So you're already ahead of a lot of people. Let me tell you, my people, this hello, okay? You're ahead of a lot of people and you're at least stepping your foot out, and we want to acknowledge the courage that it takes to explore a new relationship and to try to work past maybe some of the things that you're going through and some of the kind of pauses that you may have or some of the things and concerns that you may have. You've pushed past those things and you explore something new, so kudos to you for doing that. You also want to keep in mind that I'm echoing now, everybody. This is new, almost brand new, spanking new, like a child just coming out of the womb. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? Still
Yeah.
forming, still trying to see what's going on. I
Mhm.
do agree that a response would be amazing and wonderful. Maybe he doesn't, and it's okay. No one's wrong. It's just two separate ways of thinking, but it is
Yeah.
good to have that communication and conversation with him for sure.
Mhm. Yeah, and don't over communicate because men get pushed away very easily
Oh,
sometimes. You don't want to be like, oh my God, why aren't you responding? Hello, hello, hello. That makes them run because like, oh my gosh, she's so needy and she just give me some time. So
yeah,
listen,
it's a turn
working
off.
them overnight, sis, those aren't good because you are trying to catch up on sleep throughout the day, and
Get
then
thrown
when
off.
you're awake, everyone else is sleeping, and you don't. He probably doesn't want to be known as like that late night texter because we all know after
Hello.
9 p.m. if you're getting a text, they're not just trying to see how you're doing, sis. They're
Only a
trying to
few
do some
things are
other
going on at that time, so we just know what it is.
right,
You
those are
know,
late night creep hours. So, maybe he just doesn't have the time because trust me, I've worked them overnights and while everyone's
nothing
awake, I'm
nice.
sleeping. And while I'm awake, everybody else is sleeping. So there's no real time that works. But, you know, I'm glad
Yeah,
you like him though. Girl, we gonna
and
be praying for you because like Steph said, some of us out here solo dolo and been solo dolo forever. And it's just
right. And if you know
I
you like him
guess.
and he likes you, right? By someone we mean us. But if you know if you know he likes you and you like him, give the brother some time
Mhm.
and give him a chance to respond. And it'll be all set. And
Yeah.
what needs to work out will. So take courage, be in peace. If you had a good first date, then you'll know that it'll just keep moving on and shifting on. Awesome. That was good. Would definitely love to do more of that. If anybody wants to throw some in the comments, even for future episodes, you have questions, like get the professionals while you can, okay? While we're not charging. Okay. Because
Right.
this information you usually gotta fill out some coins for. Okay, you got the professionals free, So, oh, I like this too, though. You're definitely not needing your independent, and
Yes,
so
ma'am.
it's so good to be aware of that because right, you don't want to out or over independent someone or out independent someone, you know what I mean? So
Mhm.
it's just good to remain where you are. That's I guess that's what I'll say.
Yep.
Remain right where you are, still having feelings for this guy. If you're waiting for him and he's not contacting you, there's some choices that you can make, right? You're
Mhm.
not bound to anyone. You guys are just starting out. If this is not
Yeah.
something that you want to pursue, that's okay. Like you got on this date, you could get on another, make sure that you're keeping yourself too, that you're not running the anxious brain over and over again or ruminating or like saying over texting and things like that. Because that will cause a broken relationship even before it has a good chance to set. That'll cause something to be like, oh, I don't want to even keep this going because of how we wait. Waiting is important. How we wait in these waiting periods, it's important. What do we do? It's super important. So we are praying for you, and keep us updated, okay?
Mhm.
All right. So that was a good interruption. It was a good way for us to kind of talk real time in real life of some of the things we see and all of that. So, Chris, I did not forget. Can you share some a personal transition from brokenness to healing? Could be current, could be something you've already worked through, something that might be on the horizon. We just want to give people that process.
Um, yeah, I mean, with the time that we have left,
Mm,
I can kind of. I'm just thinking back to what I've seen go. Okay, this is the initial thought that I had before we got into the comments and all those things. So
mhm,
my initial thought was I've been to more funerals in my life than I have weddings, but
mm,
I have been to more baby showers than I have, or I would say about the same, or more baby showers than I have funerals.
mm.
So what I mean when I say that is obviously, right, the beginning stages of life and the end stages of life I've know very well.
Right.
Um, and grief is something that we can save that for another topic, but it again a generational cultural thing that families do on each side, and same thing with baby showers and how we celebrate life.
Yeah.
um, I would say weddings and the celebration of love and all those things, those aren't uh, things that I've been too familiar with have seen with my own eyes in my life. um, Off the top of my head, I mean, obviously now as an adult, I have friends who've gotten married and those things, and I love to see that. But prior to that, my grandparents, um, I think, is the longest marriage union I've known prior to me being born. Um, and then my aunt got married to her husband, both of them, when I was in like my teenage years. And then I would say pretty much the three of them until my adult life.
Yeah.
I've seen those three uh, marriages and unions of love. Um, and obviously, like we talked about, it's not only just about romantic relationships,
Yeah.
but I'm just trying to set the standard for what, again, you asked me to talk about kind of my relationship dynamics and things,
Yeah.
right? So that, and I've already mentioned before, I've had men in my life who aren't my father. Right?
Mm.
My mother and father weren't together ever in my lifetime. Um, but my mother has had relationships and my father has had relationships.
Yeah.
And kind of just to talk about briefly, those weren't the healthiest examples. Anything, I won't say everything, but a lot of things that thematically that overshadowed those relationships were, of course, domestic violence, not just only physical, but emotional.
Yeah.
Um, Alcoholism and substance abuse.
Mhm.
Um, and I obviously it's easy for me to just name and list off and talk about, is because these are things that I've thought about for most of my life. I've had conversations with Janae about. I have my therapist, so I can kind of go through them and list them, because literally I've written about them and all these kind of things. But it's safe to say that my outlook on relationships was broken. Period.
Yeah.
So from the time I started dating when I was 18, I had toxic traits, say that, and a lot of it was based off of a lot of things kept going on, but people pleasing, right? My idea of what it means to be a man in a relationship, thinking that you could buy love, and obviously understanding, love is not enough, right?
Right.
I am a great poet, a wonderful writer, but when it comes to communicating my emotions to the person in front of me, or to the person that whether it be my mom, my own father, the person that I'm dating, it's difficult.
Yeah,
it's difficult. And that's
an interesting dynamic. That's a very interesting dynamic, that you can pen things and write them down, but when it comes time, that's an interesting dynamic. That's great.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, yeah. I mean, again, that's not only, and the reason why I know this is because I've been told this, right? And obviously because I've been told this, whether it be in the heat of the moment or whatever the case is, right? If it's again a pattern that multiple people in multiple roles are saying, then it takes time. It's probably about time for me to reflect and say, well, maybe I am again having toxic traits or having issues that I need to address. Yeah. And a lot of it goes back to something I mentioned before. It's just about, they say our relationship with our mother teaches us about the relationship with the world, right?
Yeah.
And then our relationship with our father teaches us about the relationship with ourselves. So when we don't have our fathers, right, that's, like I mentioned, that identity crisis, that not knowing who I am, that, this or that or whatever the case is. And it's different when the parent that you have isn't here, right, versus the one who's here, alive and well, and maybe absent or pop in and out at certain times.
Yeah.
What makes it even more complicated is if you're raised by single mothers and your mother's presently here, the person you go to who feeds you, but your mother may be emotionally unavailable. And that emotional unavailability transfers onto you.
It does.
When, in this case, me, and that played a role in a lot of the relationships that I was in. So, prior to me kind of acknowledging that and doing the work in order to heal, it was, again, the lack of, not fully trusting anyone, not being able to speak up on things that bother me, but being passive aggressive.
Yeah.
And in those ways, again, not being comfortable with who I am. If I see someone who's comfortable with themselves, I feel as though that's an attack on my person and who I am.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I mean, it's again a never-ending cycle unless you purposely bring attention to it. My biggest thing right now is every day of my life is practice being a better person. So whatever I do, if I make a mistake yesterday, I'm gonna learn from it today, and I'm gonna move on from it. And I don't know all the answers, and I think that's kind of the biggest thing that I communicate to people, and especially when it comes to dating and those things, like being open to communicating, right, and being open to hearing you're wrong, or or something that you did to another person is wrong. One of my mentors and my aunt, she gave me great advice, which was on the professional side, but can be applied personally as well, right? No matter what your intention is, the impact that you have on the other person is more important. So if you, right, I could try to be the best boyfriend in the world and buying you flowers every week and doing that, but the second you do something, now I'm being cold. Now I'm being passive aggressive. I'm dancing around the topic, but I'm not addressing exactly how I feel, right? And then, as we know, right, once in relationships where it's passive aggressive, tends to lead to aggression, and aggression
Mm-hmm.
tends to lead to violence.
Yep.
Um, so I'll kind of cap it there. Um, but again, I've said things to women in my life that I definitely regret. Um, I've done things that I've definitely regret, and I kind of always look at it as, I'm in a position to be better, and
Mm.
I have to reflect on who I am as a man and what type of man I want to be, especially now that I have a daughter. Um,
Yeah.
my whole thing is whatever I'm doing now, uh, with her in my life, when she's old enough and she has questions, I'm gonna tell
Mm-hmm.
her the truth. I don't wanna.
Sure.
I'm not gonna hold anything back. So that influences kind of that does influence my behavior, and I call her, um, my emotional advisor, my daughter, because that advises how I'm gonna react to a situation.
Sure.
Right, when I'm around her, I can't. I'm not gonna be. I'm not saying I'm never gonna be upset, but I'll show how to properly be upset and explain those
Sure.
emotions.
Sure.
Um, I mean, it's also hard for me to be upset around her because she's so cute. But
Oh.
again, those kind of things where I have to set those up, right? I set myself up now so that way I have that boundary where I'm not going to allow a person to get me angry, or if I feel as though they are, how can I remove myself from them? And kind of, I like to think you get to a point in life where you cater your approach and cater who you have around you, so that way all the people around you are pouring in and not just taking.
That's good.
Um, Again, because I've, uh, like Jermaine mentioned, thought about what my role is in other people's lives outside of just, my title. You know, what does it mean to be son? What does it mean to be brother? What does it mean to be boyfriend? What does it mean now to be father? Um, and all those hats and all those things have similarities and common things, but
Yeah.
I think I work better as a person by drawing the line at certain things,
Mm-hmm.
um, and having those boundaries set up. But it's taken a lot of work, and it's taken a lot of mistakes and missteps. But again, I'm here to do the work. I'm here to be transparent about the work, and like I said,
Yeah.
I've gotten better at not only putting my words and emotions onto poems, but also communicating them to people who, the people in my life who I care about, and and those things. So
Awesome.
yeah,
I think that's wonderful, and I mean honestly, we don't hear enough Black men share, and so there's always going to be a safe space, for you to share, for you to talk, and to show that vulnerability. It's a model for what we want to see. It's amazing. It's beautiful to watch the process. And I know we're wrapping up. Just sharing that, our histories, they mirror in a way. My parents got divorced when I was 11, going on 12, right? And so it was such a formative year. I'm right on the cusp of adolescence, and that shaped how my relationships were going to go for the rest of my life. You know what I mean? I didn't have my first boyfriend until I was 31. I'm like, who does that? I'm a late bloomer for real, because the way I saw marriage and relationships and all that. So it matters, and it matters for us to watch it and assess it and look at it, and not get stuck in the grief or the pain of the brokenness, because then we'll be right there rooted in that. But to know I was here and I'm moving on. And so, listeners, we're not just sharing information, we're sharing our lives too. Like, we're not perfect, broken individuals who are now transitioning into healing and healed spaces. That's the wounded healer, right? We were there in a spot, now we're moving through. And you can move through too. Don't stay in your brokenness. Your trauma, your hurt, your pain, your abuse is not you. It's not your identity. It's something that happened to you. It is not you. Oh, this was such a freeing episode. I know it took a little detour because we answered some relationship questions. Like, yeah, okay, we adding that piece on. Love it so much, right? That's great. Literally, anytime you guys see us on, you guys can ask us any questions. You guys can drop some things in the chat, because that's what we're here for. We're here to let this mind be whole, be unbroken, be healed, and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
Chris, you want to share what we're going to be talking about next week?
Absolutely. I mentioned it a little bit earlier in the podcast, but next week we'll be talking about my favorite thing, Black excellence. See how my face just lights up.
Never seen you smile so bright.
I mean, yeah. Well, I mean, as much as we like to talk about the past and all those other things, I think it's important to highlight how we overcome and how we achieve, despite despite our worst setbacks, despite our worst downfalls. Like we still the three of us, all those who are listening, and then there's people around us. So, it's graduation season. It's summer's coming up. New life, new things are happening. So
Yeah.
we'll be talking about all things Black excellence next week.
Come on, bring it. Awesome. We want celebrations. We want a whole bunch of things in the chat. We want to celebrate Black excellence.
Oh yeah. So if you have someone you want to congratulate, throw it in there.
Shout them out. Shout them out, because we are living Black excellence every day. We're living our legacy and we're making our ancestors proud. All right, y'all. Thank you for tuning in. We'll be back next week at 8 p.m. every Monday. You can catch us here. We appreciate you. Thank you for everyone commenting and liking and sharing. Thank you for joining us in this podcast. This is for the people. Okay. We'll see you next week. Bye.